No sound. How's that? All right, all right. So close yet so far. So close yet so far. Before we get going, let me just run over the schedule this week, a little special schedule. Thank you for the heads up. So YouTube Live will have morning jump start this week. This is what we're watching right now, today through Thursday morning. We will do it Thursday morning, but no Friday morning show. Then we'll be back the following Monday. This week at 1:30, the studio time. There will be no studio time this week. We're going to take that time and install some new lights. Again, the whole reason I'm doing this month is kind of flush out some of these problems. We found one. We got the equipment, or it's coming today, so we're going to install that. So there'll be no studio time this week, and I hope to pick that up next week. But there will be Masterworks at 8 p.m. Monday through Wednesday. So no show Thursday, Friday, and again, that will return Monday. All right. So yeah, the studio update is we're working to improve the studio with a brighter overhead, and I hope that gets us what we need to move around. All right, I got my sound working. Looks like everybody's here. So what do you say we have a look at the grandkids? The grandkids. Do-si-do, and we're good to go. So I like where this has come so far. The faces are looking, nice and bright. There's a lot of color. And so I thought today what I would talk about is more the supporting colors that'll be in here, right? And the supporting colors should really go to reinforce the face and light, and probably more particularly the eyes. So with that said, what do we have? And like always, I can see there's a little glare coming in from the upper left. Other than that, it doesn't look like there's anything on here. So it's probably a little lighter in the photo than it looks than in real life. So a background. I think what I'm going to start with, because it is challenging, so why don't we talk about flesh tone shadows for a minute and see if we can't get some of that in there. And from there, we will find our background. And then we can think about what we want to do with the clothing. How does that sound, everybody? Good? All right. So I'm having a little thunk here, and what I thunk is, why don't we, so I'm going to turn this down to like a 60% gray. And then what I want to do is I want to talk about skin tone. All right. Hello, Katie. Welcome. So we're going to talk about skin tones right now, just in general, and then we'll look for them in, oops, a little too soon, in this particular painting. All right, so we're done with that. Let's go to this. So now if we got skin tones, what is our skin tones? Well, generally they're between like the yellow and the orange, maybe a little bit into the red, right? So our skin tones are going to be like this. The one thing about them is you're never going to find them, or too much of it anyway, over here. And what that is saturation or chroma. You see how that's really high? So our skin tones are always way grayed off. And again, we got to make sure that the skin tones in light are dark enough to hold a highlight. So make sure they're not so light that white won't read on them. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So let's see what some of these colors are here. Let me brighten that up a little bit. So if we start, there we go, let's just get a nice swath of that. And so if we brighten that up and take that down. Okay, so that's a little more in there. And then if we go any brighter, and then as we go darker, you see how the yellow in shadow has a little flavor of green in it rather than brown. But this right here is the warmest of all of that. I don't know. A lot of times people will mistakenly read this, and it's all relative, as warm, but that light compared to the shadow is actually a cool, and then that shadow is warm. Do you guys, and that's a little bit advanced, but I want to keep saying that over and over because it's the look of light, right? To have a little bit of a white in there. But before we go any further, let's just make sure that white will still read on here. And it will, right? So that means we could still get a highlight. Now, usually people think, well, this looks a little dead, and they start messing with that light color. I'm going to suggest you mess with the shadow color. Okay. And what if we made that shadow color a bit warmer? Not too much, just a bit. Did you guys see what happened there? That's pretty subtle. Can you see that switch from there over to here? It's just a slight warming, right? That warming is going to give that sense of life, right? That coolness in the shadow makes it seem, And what if we just knocked it up maybe one more notch here? Ooh. Ooh. Okay, are you guys able to pick that up? Let me know if you can see those differences on your screen. I'm actually genuinely curious if your screen is picking up those differences between 1, 2, and 3. Because those are super subtle there. So let me know, because if not, I'll exaggerate to demonstrate. Let's see. So Susan made it. Good morning, Susan. So we're talking about portraits today, but we're starting out with just a general color talk. And light and shadow. I went to a portrait workshop where we stained our canvas with the sage greens for an undercolor. It's, there's different things. That's not bad. What that undercolor would represent here. Now, again, you say a sage green. I don't know how bright or anything, but like what it would represent here would be and that's way too intense. Let's drop that down. Would be the air, right? So the purpose of staining the canvas, and I know this isn't exactly sage green, but it would be to act as that role right in there between your light and the shadow. And if your canvas was stained this value, then what that means is you can actually just gray this color off by thinning it down and letting it go away until only the stain of the canvas shows here, which will be your air, and it'll just let go. And then as you come into the light, that quality builds with thickness from that stain of the canvas. Man, the impact is incredible. Then if you go from the stain of the canvas on the shadow side to flatter paint over here, the combination of those three really creates magic. All right, again, I know that was a little bit advanced, but that would be how, like a gray-green, you could stain the canvas and what role that would play here. I can see clearly. All right, cool. Cool, so we can see the colors, All right, see the colors. Good. Sometimes I wonder what's coming out on the other end of the screens. So that's a more of a yellow skin tone. And just as a reminder, did everybody see how we went from kind of the, I don't want to say exact shadow, but just straight down the line of the hue right towards dark and value? And then we come up with this, it leans green a little bit. And in certain circumstances, that will be good, but it feels dead. Whereas that more warmth in there will bring more life, right? And where did that conversation start at? It started when we put that green shadow on there, and I said, now if that doesn't sparkle, the first thing you're going to do is go change that color and light. And what I'm encouraging you to do is try warming the shadow up instead. Okay? So that is the idea, and that would look more like that. Okay, a warmer shadow. So, how did I do? So, was that too long-winded? This information just takes a little while. So then if we move to a little more color over here, right? Let's keep our value reasonable. So we're going to have a similar setup, but this time we just inched from yellowish to orangish. Okay, as we climb the ladder, we add little white. Some of the color goes away. Right, and then we could probably even go lighter than that on this one, I think. Right, so that's straight down the line. And can you already feel, let's see. I cheated there because that should have had a little more chroma, not less. So let's see, yeah, that feels better. That feels a little better. Right, so notice how the darker I go, the more color I put into it. Right, and the lighter I go, the less color I put into it. Or another way to say that is that this range is higher chroma and that range is more gray. You know, for portraits. Well, in light in general, depending. So, is that a good shadow? It's not bad, But what'll happen if we warm that shadow up a little bit? So this would be taking it a little more towards red, maybe a little more chroma, and slightly lighter. Do you guys see that subtle little shift? Okay, so that's what warms up means. And when I'm always talking about measure, is when I tell people to warm it up, generally they'll come back with something like that. And yeah, you warmed it up, and yeah, there's no white in it, but that's a lot. That's a lot, and it's too much, right? I just needed a pinch of salt, and you gave me 2 shovelfuls. So that, again, for those of you who are still trying to figure out, that's the measure, but that is going to have a better read and more life to it than that. Okay, so before we go from here, we've got to make sure we got room for highlight. Okay, and it looks like a highlight will sit on any one of those. Okay, let's see. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. And since we are short on time, we could just go through and do these kind of value scales on the different chromas and lean them warm, cool, like that. But I wanted to show you the idea that I'm going to be using for the portrait. Okay, so let's just focus on one at a time here. Ooh, that looked just about right to me. So that right in there looks pretty good. So can you warm up any color with red? I don't want to say that because I could think of a permanent green light and red would crush that. Right? So it's hard to go absolutely, but for the most part, a good portion, you can warm them up with red. You have to watch maybe the blues and the greens, because they can just go too neutral, right? And what we're trying to do is send them around to the yellow, orange, red side rather than to the middle. That's kind of the idea here. And depending on what colors you have, it can be a little tricky sometimes. So again, that's one reason I want to repeat that there'll be no 1:30 show this week. We're getting new equipment, new lighting, and so we're going to be upgrading the equipment during that time period. But when we get it fixed, one of the things I hope to be able to do is to over time walk us through mixing all of the colors, light and shadow. Okay. So if we look at that shadow there, you see that little bit of purple, and trust me, I know this is, I struggled and struggled and struggled, and nobody stopped and said this stuff to me. You know, that's neither here nor there, but just saying that I'm absolutely not getting on anybody. This is very, very common. But that's cool. That's warm. But again, it's if I was going to use that, I might tend to use that more for kind of the color in the cheeks and go a bit darker for the shadow. Let's see. But since these are, you know, small children, I'm going to see if I can't keep my shadow up a bit. In other words, not as dark as I might make it. So what if, again, without knowing the children too well, and it's never really flat like some of it will go, but just for argument's sake, right, let's call front planes, let's call these front planes. And it's hard with the children, I know, because they're so round, they're so beautiful and round, but front planes, front planes, front planes. Now, the forehead and the cheeks and the nose generally differ by the cheeks. That's a little bit warm. Usually be slightly darker. We'll have more blood in them. So that means a little more color. Again, you got to be careful because that's quite a bit. Is that too much? I don't know. But the color, and then the nose will be slightly darker and richer. And again, you got to be careful with this on young ones, but that helps. You somehow have to get this nose off of those cheeks. Okay, and then the lower third will tend to be a bit grayer. Again, you got to be careful with this on children and women. If you go too gray or too green, you can give them a beard, make them look like they have stubble. So this will be going back into air on the light side. So this right here would be the tone of the canvas that you would build over with that gray green, that green you were saying, if it was being used right. If it was being used right. Let's see. We go back into air, a little bit, a little bit. All right. And then our shadow. So let's try what we just learned. Let's take it darker. Let's take it warmer. And let's just see where that lands us. Okay, so that lands us right there. And that may not be too bad for a child. It's not going to be strong light and shadow, but most of the time you're not going to want to paint a child with too drastic of a value change. I'm not saying it can't be done, but just because you want to keep the edges soft. Could we get away with calling that our shadow? Maybe. Again, you can see that it doesn't carry real strong. But let's see what we can do with that background. Before we leave, we need a highlight. Katie, if you have any questions up to this point, you can get in touch with Cindy and she'll let me know. And you're also free during class today to ask. Oh yeah, so not too drastic. Again, because it's not that it can't be done, but the wider the value change, right, the more, just think drama. I mean, you can almost think like Lovers or something, right? They're so intense one way, and then there's fights and the other way. It's just back and forth, back and forth. That's kind of the opposite of the child. Although there are ups and downs, it's much softer, right? Much softer. All right, so what were we doing? We were doing the highlights. highlight showed up. Yeah, I mean, that looks pretty kid-like to me, even as rough as I have it here. Right? Again, probably not so much gray, and as you soften those edges. That's, again, it's hard to judge there with that really hard, the hard edges, because it looks different. Okay, starting to come to life a little bit. And let's see, how are we doing, everybody? Everybody following along? Everybody following along? And so let's look. What I want to do now is see if you guys can get a hold of this. So when I'm thinking of my background, you know that color I put in there for air? That's what I'd like to base my background on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to a value that's in between my light and my shadow. And our shadow is not too dark here, so this is going to be a little finer. And let's drop that chroma way down and see what happens. But, right, it's not exactly the same, but you see it. What it's going to do is it's going to harmonize things. And especially if I don't want a lot of darks in the kids. And again, it's up to you. That there have been beautiful paintings done in the chiaroscuro style with some real darks and stuff that we could talk about. But that gray back, you see that creates a little softer. Then I could add touches of color and I can send it back into shadow. Well, what do you mean send it into shadow? Well, simply let it get a little darker, slightly warmer. And again, if we wanted air. Right, usually you don't have real hard lines in air, so. And the background, even if it doesn't go on for infinity, it's background, which means it's behind the foreground, which means we're looking through more air. Right? So even if the background is a relatively bright color or something, we're seeing that color through much more air than we're seeing our object. And that's the point we want to make with background. Right? Okay. So anywho, why don't we stop it there today, since we do have class coming up. You can work on that, and again, please resubmit it, because I would love to help you carry that along. This would be such a cool thing to have, and we'll see where we can get it to. Okay. Yeah, but it just takes a little time. But I hope that helped. Again, what if you want more? What if that's just not enough? Well, then you just go a little bit darker and you test it out. But don't test it out on a spot. In other words, to really see what that value is going to do, you need to cover, right, everything. Right? And notice I can do these little shifts, right? It doesn't have to be huge and drastic. So here we can get a little more shadow, a little more, feels a little more substantial. Right, it was just feeling a little unsubstantial to me. So just by darkening those shadows, then we can soften the edges and stuff. Okay, let's see. Let's see what we have to say before we move on to our class. Wow, nice. Thanks. All right. So I think you'll be in good shape. Really? All right. Glad you guys enjoy it. Yeah, I really hope to get into some more of this color stuff. But again, I got to get some of this technology under my belt first. So wonderful. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I hope everybody got plenty out of that. A reminder, YouTube schedule, Morning Jump Start. This show right here, 8 a.m. Monday through Thursday this week. No studio time for this week. At 1:30 in the afternoon, I'm going to be installing some new lightings to try to improve the show. But we will continue with Masterworks at 8 p.m. in the evening, Pacific Standard Time. And that'll be Monday through Wednesday this week. Okay, and then we'll be back Monday. And if all goes well with the installation of the lighting, including our 1:30 show. So we'll let you know about that. There'll be Sketch Club Live Tuesday night, but no Thursday show on Facebook. For you guys in class, we will see you in about 20 minutes on Zoom, 25 minutes. And for the rest of you guys, hope to see you back tonight at 8. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for coming.